Welcome friends! In this series I play a selected retro console game and then follow that with a simple question. Is it engaging or is it enraging? Today's game is a console port of the massive arcade hit Mortal Kombat 2 for the Nintendo Game Boy and was released worldwide on October the 27th, 1994. Developed by Probe Entertainment, this game was an attempt to condense the enormity of the arcade release into a handheld greenscale console. At first glance, this whole concept seems to be the byproduct of a boardroom full of rampaging maniacs, but if you get the right group of people behind something like this, it can work. So, did the Game Boy get treated to a port of the first game of the series? Well indeed it did, and it was also released by Probe Entertainment earlier the same year. Was it any good, you ask? Well, here's a clip of my badly coordinated idiot trying to defeat his opponent with immense difficulty. The cartridge was used more like a septic tank to house this unholy turd of a game. The graphics are ideal for somebody suffering from a recently botched cataract surgery, the music and sound effects will make you envy the death, and if the buttons you press match the responses displayed on the screen, then this is an act of pure coincidence. Your reward for enduring this blurry pustule of a game is to get to fight as the game's sub-boss Goro next time, unless of course you use a Game Shark to force the game to play as him instantly. This is an ideal way to be disappointed and frustrated in less time. If this was the game in mind for today's review, this video would be 6 straight minutes of fart noises and my anguish screaming. Thankfully, Probe Entertainment seem to have sent most of the staff that made the first game on a one-way trip to the job centre, as Mortal Kombat 2 on the Game Boy was a dramatic improvement in every way. One thing for us to consider about any 80s and 90s ports of arcade games is that having a decent portable version was, for the most part, an unfulfilled fantasy. Recently though, I have played the Nintendo Switch version of Skyrim to death, as it still amazes me that I can carry around a game that was otherwise always shackled to a TV and a larger games console. As far as mainstream handhelds went, the only things beneath the hardware of the exceptional original Game Boy were the Tiger Electronics versions that were always unplayable LCD-based sculpted dog turds, and their watch versions, which were just smaller sculpted dog turds of the same game that happened to be attached to an adjustable wrist strap. So, it's understandable that corners had to be cut, along with vast swathes of everything. The graphics were ideal for anybody who liked 4 shades of green being stuffed onto a 2.7-inch screen. The overall sound was slashed to ribbons and was reduced to 3 music tracks, a fatality theme and about a dozen sound effects. The character roster was reduced to 8 from the original 12, and the sub-boss Kintaro was also catapulted into the sun for good measure. Finally, the fights took place in one of 2 locations that cycle until the game ends. Finishing off this fire sale of compromises, we have the original 5 buttons reduced to a kick, a punch and an awkwardly placed block key on the start button. Bearing this in mind, making this game at all was the equivalent of trying to post an elephant through the average letterbox, alive. So, let's focus on what was left after the ransacking took place. Choosing a character out of 3 guys or 2 gals with masks facing in different directions would be easier for it bloody well bother to tell us who they were. However, each of these characters are equipped with at least 3 special moves, a single fatality that most often turn their enemies into amusing bones or potatoes, and they even managed to squeeze in a babality move. There is a single stage fatality that is annoyingly the spiked ceiling of the Kombat tomb rather than the inviting narrow walkway over a pit of spiky pointy things, but what do I know. We even have 2 hidden fights that are Smoke, the 4th masked man doing his best Pigpen impression from Peanuts, and Jade, a fast and infinitely cheap 3rd version of the masked women, except that if you rely on projectile attacks, you are screwed. So now I've given you all this information, how does the game play? Well, here's the real shocker. You now have a mostly responsive experience and multiple frames of animation instead of the choppy, bugged out, unresponsive crapfest that was the last game. The punching and kicking action feels like there's at least some weight to it, and it still amazes me that the character Shang Tsung can morph into any other ordinary character he wishes to on this version. Difficulty-wise, it progresses from a piece of piss, to average, to a challenge, in a satisfactory way as you fight your way to the top of the game ladder. However, Any notion of fairness goes flying out of the window as you face the cheapest son of a bitch in form of the game's final boss. Expect to get shoulder barged into a mental asylum as he will block anything you throw at him. Once you've thrown your Game Boy at a wall, stamped on the pieces, regretted it, and bought another to complete this trial, Shao Kahn is defeated and he gets so angry he explodes into potatoes for your efforts. We get our final bag of words on the screen, followed by the credits, and then a game over by the real version you peasant screen, which will now lead to the question, is this game engaging or enraging? Given all the considerations from earlier, I would comfortably say that Mortal Kombat 2 for the Game Boy is an engaging game. I lived through a time where ported arcade games would appear on much weaker hardware that made you think, oh wow, we're actually lucky to have this on here, and it's playable! For its time and place, this port was a portable fighting game that was fun, well featured, and felt at least a bit like the original. Even with its vast limitations, it put up a good fight, and for this, childhood me will always be truly thankful. Until next time on an Enraging or Engaging, goodbye friends.